In 1999, Apple released their first laptop with Wi-Fi. And they were not behind the curve, they were ahead of the game. In fact, the concept was so new, they had their executive, Phil Schiller, jump off the stage to demonstrate the idea of a wireless future.
I'm sorry, I don't think the mics are working. You said what?
I think you should jump.
All right. I don't know, you guys think I should do it?
And because nobody had wireless devices, surely nobody had a Wi-Fi router either. And so Apple released one. It was called the Airport, and it launched in 1999 alongside these original devices. The original Airport sucked, and so did the subsequent Airports, but the reality is Apple got really good at making Wi-Fi routers really quickly. And by the mid-2000s, Apple was one of the leaders in home consumer wireless networking. Weird to think about now. In 2008, they released what I believe to be the cream of the crop, the best device they ever made, and that is a time capsule. Because not only was it a router, or a wireless access point, but it also allowed you to address and access network accessible storage. It was pretty slick, and I want to show you how this whole setup would work. You'd either use your iPhone and or your Mac to open up Airport Utility. It was an app that was available on the Mac by default or available from the App Store. You'd come in here, you'd push Edit, and under one single tab, this is before the era of Eros or Google Wi-Fi's, this was in the era where setting up Wi-Fi networks was impossible. You just had sheer simplicity. You could come in here to network, and you could choose to handle the routing on this device, and or if you had a Wi-Fi router supplied by your ISP, you could just use bridge mode and defer it to that device. You could come into the wireless tab and set up your own Wi-Fi network. You could create secondary or guest net networks. You could even extend existing wireless networks, kind of like the OG original mesh system, not just with other airports, but with other devices as well. And if you had other airports, like an Airport Express, well, you could use those devices as endpoint AirPlay speakers. Pretty amazing stuff. But the best part, and what I love the most, is this Disks tab. In 2008, the Time Capsule, for the first time ever, put a hard drive inside of one of these devices. And what it allowed you to do was back up your Macs via Time Machine to this little network accessible storage device. You could come into Time Machine inside of your system preferences. You could click that, you could say add backup disk, and bada boom, bada bing, I didn't have to do anything, I can back up my Mac. Conversely, I can come into the Finder, and I select Nelson Time Capsule, it's already available on my Mac by default, and heck yeah, I can share devices in between my Mac and frankly, PC and other devices seamlessly. It really was exceptionally cool. This was the original NAS for the traditional home consumer. It was storage that was accessible via the network. But when you think of a NAS, you're probably thinking of something more like this. This is a Synology, but there are a bunch of different options on the market. QNAP is another really popular brand. And sure, this is network attached storage. Like the Time Capsule, I have hard drives that I can put on my network. And frankly, this is more capable than a Time Capsule because I have redundant storage. So why is this not really a NAS? Because it's a server. It's got a really powerful CPU in it, which allows it to run Plex Media Server or a bunch of Docker instances like Home Assistant, other things that you might want on your home network. And beyond that, you can access and manage this thing over the internet. There are built-in applications, it runs Linux. It is not really a NAS so much as it is a computer, a server. And because it's a computer, well, they're pretty expensive, and they're not really all that powerful because they are still trying to draw the minimum amount of wattage from the wall possible. But even then, they draw quite a lot of power. It's currently drawing about, right now, 70 to 75 watts. 70 to 75 watts all day, every single day, which is what this thing will be doing because it's serving you data at all times, adds up to $10 to $15 extra per month. That's $150 or more per year just to run a server down in your basement. Oh. So that's why I'm excited about this thing. This is the new UNAS Pro from Ubiquiti. And boy, it's pretty cool because it combines the best of both worlds. You can access all of your files over the internet. You can manage the console remotely, if you wish. And best of all, hardware kit. This tab is... cables. Best of all, it has the efficiency of a much less consumptive device. This thing runs an ARM quad-core processor, an A57. It's clocked at like 1.4 gigahertz. It's not very fast. There's 8 gigs of memory too, but this thing is not really a speed demon. The goal is for it to use as little power as possible. The SoC itself draws mere watts from the wall. And the end result is that you find yourself with something that uses very, very little power, but has a ton of expansion capabilities. This is a 7-bay setup here, and you've got not only gigabit Ethernet, but 10 gigabit SFP. So you've got 10 gig Ethernet, you've got 7 drive bays. It's in this nice aluminum enclosure that you can rack mount or with little rubber feet put on your desk. And it's $499. That is a fraction, like half of the cost of a full-size NAS. And as you'll see pretty soon, offers you almost the same capability. Now, installing this is going to be a piece of cake because we're going to be installing it alongside a bunch of other Ubiquiti gear. That's what I've used at Snazzy Labs for years. They've sent a lot of it, but I've also purchased a lot on my own. But you don't need to. This is effectively a UniFi NVR, their network video recorder, but with NAS software and purposes. And so you can actually just run this standalone. You don't have to have other Ubiquiti equipment. But if you do, it sure does make the install process easier. See these things? These are cage nuts. Everybody hates them, nobody likes them. I'm gonna go eat worms, except for no, I don't have to, because this thing is slick. Do you know what else is slick? Today's sponsor, Bamboo. Yeah, I don't want to talk about this right now. We don't have time. Today's sponsor, Bamboo Lab, and their A1 Mini 3D printer. Look, I have been a Bamboo Lab fan for a while, a paying customer, but they sent me this, and holy crap, my mind is blown. This is right now, through the end of the year, I'm going to cut to the chase, $179, which is an insane value because not only does it create incredibly good looking 3D prints very quickly, but it has features that you've never seen on budget printers and frankly, not even high-end printers until fairly recently. Yeah, sure, it does auto bed leveling, it does Z offset calibration, that's the normal stuff. But it does pressure advance, it does automatic flow rate calibration, it has a filament runout sensor, it works with this AMS light to use an odometer for all of your filament to keep track of how much you have of each one remaining. And not only that, but you can use all 4 of these filaments at the same time into the extruder to create multicolored prints. This is stuff of the future. And if that wasn't already good enough, it's completely accessible and usable over your phone. You don't need to get into slicers. You don't need to know anything about 3D printing. You unplug it or you plug it in, you do the initial setup and calibration. It does everything for you. And then you just come into this app, you choose a model that you want to print, you push go, and you can remotely monitor and control it from their fantastic app. I am not joking when I say I save hundreds of dollars a year from 3D printing. Anytime I need a weird part or an adapter that I don't want to buy on Amazon, just someone else that is also cheap has made a version accessible for free to the world. You print it out, it's 20 cents of plastic, and you're done. This thing, especially at $179, will literally pay for itself, and it's so much fun. It's great for kids, it's great for adults. I love it. Go check these guys out. This is superb. I can just feed my power cable through right here. And this toolless rack is really small. It's only 6U, but I can just slide the server right in. Haha. And then using these thumb screws, I can fasten it into place. And that's literally it. That's all she wrote. All right, we got 7 drives. Now, you don't actually need to populate all 7 drive bays. But I've got a bunch of these 14 terabyte Seagate Ironwolf Pros. And you know what they say? Well, you know what Jay-Z says.
Have you seen the news about Jay-Z?
No, what? Oh. Well, we won't talk about Jay-Z anymore. This is a toolless installation. You push the pull tab and you push the drive in. That's all there is to it. Toolless installs are the best. You don't even need to pull the tab up. Ooh, I didn't like that one. Hold on, let's redo this. All right, 6 of the 7 drive bays, really good. So I have an open SFP port here on my other switch. Now you might be thinking, SFP, I've never used that or heard of that. Why not just RJ45? Well, 10 gigabit RJ45 requires NICs that are quite a bit more expensive than what you would get inside of an SFP device, and also they use more power. So SFP is traditionally used, and frankly, most new fiber modems, even ones assigned by ISPs, typically have one of these available, open and ready to go. At least the one I have from Google Fiber certainly does. Okay, so it says ready for setup. I'm going to open up the UniFi app here, and then I'm going to go over to devices, and it should say, hey, yep, new device sound, found, UNAS Pro. I'm going to push setup, and that's literally it. I'm going to name it, yeah, UNAS Pro is fine. Okay, oh, look at that. So it shows me all 7 of my hard drives. Apparently 6 of them are healthy. Hard drive 2 is risky. Interesting. I'm betting this is just looking at the trim or smart kind of settings on the actual drive to see if there's bad sectors on them. These are old drives. I've used these in multiple servers over probably like 5 or 6 years now. They're 14 terabytes. They're tiny. So, well, rather than just have this drive go kaput, I'm gonna go find another one and swap it out. All right, next step. I choose my preferred storage and protection policy. Okay, so this gives me a few options. Basic protection with large storage space, or higher protection with limited storage space. This is RAID 5 and RAID 10. RAID 6 is not yet available. It will be coming soon in a software update, says Ubiquiti. Why it wasn't there from day one, I don't know. That's what I think most people would choose. Now, if you don't have a bunch of drives, you just got 1 or 2. If you have 2 drives, you can do RAID 0, which is no data redundancy, but you have maximum storage space, or RAID 1, where one drive mirrors the other one. I suggest you have some form of redundancy built in. What is kind of neat is that if you have, because there are 7 drives, you can make one of them hot spare, which just basically puts it into hibernate mode until it's ready to take over and replace a failed drive. But I'm going to go with something that offers a little higher protection and much more limited storage space. So you'll actually see down here, it tells you how much is remaining. So I'll have 42 terabytes of available storage, 42 terabytes of protection, and then I still have one hot spare of 14 terabytes that can just sub itself in when and if one of these 6 drives fails. Perfect. Next. And that's it. It's preparing UniFi, 35 seconds left. Presumably it's prepping the RAID array, and then that's all there is to it, buddy. It's booting with 2 minutes remaining. Now, we've already discussed that this has an ARM SoC inside, but what operating system is it running? Well, Linux. And the RAID array is actually managed by MD80M. Super tried and true, bulletproof, been around forever, works really, really well, but also kind of complicated and confusing. And so on top of MD80M, they're actually using Btrfs for snapshot management and a bunch of other stuff. So it's kind of a hodgepodge because Btrfs is not typically very good at actual drive management, and so they leave that to MD80M on the Linux side, and then you interface with Btrfs if you choose to even do that directly, because most of the time you're just gonna be using the console, but you can use SSH and the command line, and I'm rambling. Hurry up and boot, this is getting boring. So I love these ether lighting cables from Ubiquiti. They're super thin and you get an LED, which seems dumb, but it's actually really nice when you want to like find a specific device that you're working on. But this crappy old Ethernet cable, this has effectively the same effect because it's got a clear plastic shell. Ha, take that, Ubiquiti. I don't need your special cables. I do like them though. We got to do the rest of the setup on a computer. That's fine. I'd want to do it there anyway. But that would require me to stand up, and I am pretty comfortable. Dang it, Ubiquiti, come on! All right, we're in. Now I am managing this from the web instead of locally, but you can do it locally if you so wish and not ever connect this to the internet. I'm gonna push drive, I'm going to agree to sell my organs to Ubiquiti, and then allow them to, I don't know, take my money or something. Okay, we're in. For optimal speed, mount the drives on macOS or Windows via SMB. SMB is the fastest, we'll show you how to do that. And here are all my drives. I can click into each one. Oh, no I can't because they're still initializing. Oh, this may take some time. All right, it looks like our array is still getting set up, but we can have some fun in the meantime. It has created 2 drives by default. One is for me, the super admin, Quinn Nelson, just my own private drive, and then the other one is called Shared Drive Example. It's also prompted me to set up a snapshot schedule. I think of snapshots kind of like backups, but all on this same array. We have redundant storage, but we need to not only have redundant storage for a specific file, but we want to have files as they change and get added and get modified over the course of the server's life. So if I schedule this, it's basically going to take a screenshot every time I specify every day at 12 a.m. And it's going to say, hey, do you have any files that are new? Add them to my snapshot. Do you have any files that have changed? Maybe a text file that you modified? Change that too. So that if in a week I go, oh crap, I need that old text file before I changed it, well, you can just restore it easy peasy. If you're a Mac user, you might be thinking, wait a minute, that sounds like Time Machine. It does, because it's the same thing. And Time Machine, speak of the devil, is actually supported and enabled by default. This will show up once you connect your Mac to the Samba Share as a Time Machine drive that you can back your computer up to. Samba is enabled by default, but it also supports NFS and a couple of other file access protocols. SMB is by far what I prefer and choose to use. And it looks like I need to add some credentials in order to access it via SMB, but that's actually great. And that brings me to one nerdy part that most people won't really care about, but this supports identity endpoint integrations and directory lookups. So if you have Active Directory from Microsoft or Google Secure LDAP or LDAP in general, because you're running some sort of enterprise system where your employees have their own logins and it's all managed through their email and through the server, I don't do that stuff, but if you do, it's able to work through here, which is great for even small businesses that do that. So this is clearly designed for business. But if you're just a Joe Blow like me, you can set up a local account or you can use a Ubiquiti identity account, which is what I'm going to do. So let me set that up. All right, Ubiquiti, I've done a lot of network storage in the past, and this is pretty slick. Okay, so let's pretend that this is much bigger than it is. We've got 100 hard drives. That is an array of drives. And within an array, there are oftentimes multiple pools. It's just a big group of disks that you put together to be one addressable volume. This array only has one pool. But within a pool, you can create multiple shares or virtual drives, which basically are exactly what they sound like. They're software or artificially limited disks that are limited to certain people, under certain permissions, with certain read-write access of certain size. And well, we can set these up super easy. I'm just going to go to add shared drive. I'm going to call this, let's call this footage. If I want to, I can enforce a storage limit. So I can say this will never exceed 15 terabytes of my 40 something terabyte array. I'm going to turn that off because we use a lot of footage. And then you can add users. By default, all the admins have access, but I can also say, hey, Benjamin works at Snazzy Labs. He's going to need to add footage. So let's add him to this array. I push add, and that's it. We're done. That is slick. Trust me, there are a lot of other pieces of software that are way more complicated than that. And then I can go in here, I can set up my snapshot control. Oh man, this is cool. Now hurry up and initialize my disks. Big disk energy.
It's tomorrow. It snowed. And I got kind of sick. But I have this low voice. Hello. Okay. I decided last night before we left to change my RAID configuration from RAID 10, traditional redundant setup, to RAID 5, something that has less redundancy, but something that theoretically should have a lot more speed. Problem is, I got here and, well, there's still 24 hours left to initialize this drive. It's got to do all these parity calculations to make sure that redundancy is there. It's a complex setup. And so my performance is going to be somewhat inhibited, but we can still try to see what our speeds might be. So I'm going to go here to the dashboard, and there's two ways for me to mount this server to my Mac. The easiest way is to just come in here and push this little copy clipboard button next to the Mac, and then I go to Command K, connect to server, paste that URL, push connect, and then there you go. I can choose what shares I'd like to mount. But there's also another really cool way. Ubiquiti has an app called Ubiquiti Identity, and it's the way by which you'll probably, in a home setup, access your actual network and your server itself. And what you can do is just open up this app once you're signed in and say, hey, enable auto-integrate drive into Finder, and any drives that you have permissions to will be automatically mounted and unmounted as needed, which is super cool. So this mounts them directly to my hard drive or to my desktop. I didn't have to do anything. Of course, if you're not a weirdo like me and you choose not to show your connected servers to your Finder, you can do that. But I'm gonna come in here and just let's open this footage folder. This is a massive file. This is 23.63 gigs. Let's just drag it over and get a vibe check for how the speeds are going. You know? That's not too, ooh, that's pretty fast. See, here's the thing about transfer speeds and networks and everything. It depends. The larger your file and the fewer files you have, the faster your throughput will be able to go. If you have lots of small files, it's just gonna take some time. But with big video files like this, this isn't bad. Now, I can tell that I'm not transferring at 10 gigabits per second, which is what theoretically I'm capable of because I have a NIC right here that is Thunderbolt 3 that is capable of 10 gigabit. And the reason I know that is because we transfer footage and this feels a little bit slower. So what I could do is open up a Blackmagic disk speed test. I'm going to use a 5 gigabyte file because, again, the bigger, fewer files, the faster your transfer speeds. I'm going to select my target share. Yeah, the personal drive is fine, sure. And I'm going to push go. And performance is, again, not bad for 300 megabytes per second, but it's going to be very inconsistent in its write speeds. And that's, again, because the drive, the array itself, is creating parity across all of the disks, and performance is pretty massively inhibited. But you can see that my read speeds, they're actually not bad. 600 megabytes per second, that's not too shabby. Now, that's not saturating 10 gigabit. 10 gigabit is, well, 10 gigabit divisible by 8 into megabytes. So that's like 1.25 gigabytes per second. But some of that is lost to TCP IP overhead. That's like best case scenario. Realistically, you can expect about a gigabyte per second in a fully saturated 10 gigabit Ethernet setup. And well, we're clearly not there, especially in the write speeds. But part of this might be because this is a server that has all spinning hard drives. I don't have any SSDs, so we're limited by the speed of the disk. And frankly, and this is what I tend to think is most likely, it's just limited by the fact that the array is initializing. And once that's done, and maybe, hey, here is the performance results once the drive is done initializing. Wow, that is much faster and or not that much different, and I am or am not surprised based on the results. I've still got a couple cool things to show you, but there are some weird things, and this is one that just is flummoxing to me. The software is clearly early days, and I really think that Ubiquiti should fix this one. Okay, so I mentioned previously that Time Machine is supported on the UNAS Pro, and it's enabled by default, and there's literally just a checkbox. Time Machine on, Time Machine off. It's simple. The problem is, it's too simple. So if I come into here, into Time Machine, and say add a backup disk, automatically my personal drive will say, hey, you can back up via Time Machine to this disk. Would you like to? And that makes sense because that's the credentials that I'm logged into in the server. And that's how I've mounted the server to my desktop. Okay, what's the problem? Well, the problem is that Time Machine doesn't respect size limits. Technically, you can run some weirdo terminal command, and you better hope that it sticks to say, hey, don't exceed this number of megabytes in backup files, but normal people aren't going to know that. And if you're running this for a company, you're going to have to enforce that from like an IT. It's just not practical. And this is where it gets tricky, right? If I come into my admins and users, I go to users and I select myself, I can go to settings, and my thought was, oh, well, I'll just create a new personal drive. One personal drive for my files with a size limit, and another personal drive for Time Machine backups with its own size limit. Nope. Each user gets one personal drive. That's it. And the personal drive is the only drive that you can enable to be used for Time Machine backups. So I can't create a shared drive called Time Machine, and I can't create personal limits on my own drive. Well, I mean, I can, but I can say, okay, enforce a storage limit, 2 terabytes, but that's 2 terabytes for Time Machine and all the personal files that I have under that username. Not really all that great. Now, if you're in a home situation, this is probably not a big deal, but if you want some separation between your admins and your users and your shared drives and your non-shared drives, this is not ideal. And I think they really ought to fix it. But this, my friends, is what has completely sold me on the UNAS Pro, these next few features. Okay, if you've ever used a Synology or a QNAP, you know that they're good devices, but that their web GUIs are just frankly really slow. And that's because they're running these massively bloated versions of Linux with ancient looking GUIs. They have like 2 or 4 gigabytes of memory, and they're using like old Intel Celeron or Atom processors. They're just not designed to handle that kind of workload. This has better specs. It's an ARM chip with 8 gigabytes of memory, and it is lean and it is mean and everything is super light. I'm doing this over the internet. This isn't even locally, and watch how fast this is, okay? I'm gonna come into my footage folder. I'm gonna go to my UNAS Pro. I'm gonna click this image and say, show me a preview. That's a preview loaded directly from my server over the internet. It's so slick. I can rename, I can duplicate, I can do all of the stuff that I might expect to do with a regular file browser, but it gets even crazier. I can come into footage, I can click this document, and oh crap, I had a version yesterday that I think I had a couple more paragraphs and then I deleted them. No problem, because we have version control. Snapshot, babies. snapshots, baby. I can go to the version from yesterday. Oh yeah, it is bigger, 402 bytes. I can choose to preview it, or I can just push restore. And it says, are you sure you want to restore? I push restore, and then boom, no downloading it from the web, no having to do anything weird. That version, the old version, has been replaced with the version that I wanted network-wide, accessible from any machine right the second that I do it. It is so, so good. But it gets even crazier, okay? I'm gonna come into UNAS Pro, and I've got this big video file. I want to share this with a client. I don't want to have to download it and then upload it to Google Drive or OneDrive. Synology and QNAP can do this, yes, but I don't find them to be very good at it. That's actually why we still had that Synology. Is we were trying to do it for this purpose, and it just was too slow, and we'd run into weird memory errors, and clients from halfway across the world would say, the Synology cloud's not working. This is like spotless. Now, what we could do is open up our big server to the internet, but that's hardly ideal either, because we have to set up a proxy server, and then we've got to have like a Linode tunnel that we set up so that it's only accessible from a certain IP to try and make it as secure as possible. Then still at the end of the day, all of our mission critical data is just sitting on the internet, and I'm not a sysadmin. I'm not confident that it's fine. So this is the solution. I can go to the current version, I can find the file that I want, I can go to share, and I can set up a link to share with an expiry date, with an access limit, a certain number of people or times that the link is accessed, with a password, and then I just press create and copy link. I push copy link or copy QR code or download QR code, and that's all she wrote, baby. It's ready to share. But that's not all. I'm going to go into here into settings and backups. A RAID is not a backup. It is redundant, but it's not a backup. You still need backups. And the problem with traditional larger servers is that they want to back up to other traditional larger servers. Not practical or feasible for a small business, or frankly, just a guy with one of these in his basement. This is where this gets cool. I can say, let's select the data to back up. I can choose to back up an entire drive or even specific subsets of folders, which, there we go. This is the only folder with anything on it. So I can upload this folder, I'm gonna push select, and then it's gonna say, okay, do you wanna go to another UNAS device that you have added to your Ubiquiti account? Cool, but I don't have one of those. Well, what about an SMB server? I could back it up to our big server, but this is what I love. You can back it up to Google Drive, baby. Anybody that's ever backed up files en masse to Google Drive knows that it's not a good experience. Google throttles you. They make the download speeds and upload limits very, very, very slow on purpose because they don't want you uploading terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of data. And if you're doing it through a web browser on your computer, it's hell. But this is doing it its own, in the background without any interference from you. So you link your account and you just say, yep, upload that whole thing, terabytes of data. And it doesn't matter if it takes 3 days or 2 weeks to upload because this device is just handling it in the background. It's so awesome. All right, let's talk about link sharing on mobile and accessing from mobile in general. There it is, the QR code that we created just a couple of minutes ago. And now it's time to download it, or attempt to download it, using my iPhone over 5G. I also have my mobile Safari open to private browsing, so I'm not logged in to any of my Ubiquiti stuff. This is completely over the internet as if I was just some rando guy that got access to this QR code or URL. I click the button, and then it loads and connects to UniFi Drive. I can see a preview if it's a video or a file that has a preview. Because the server is still building, it's not doing video previews very well, but I presume that will be fixed. And then I can push download, and sometimes it will work and sometimes it won't. That's a limitation of mobile Safari. If you have an unzipped file that's over like 4 to 5 gigs, it sometimes struggles. And that's really, yep, there you go. This file exceeds the browser size limit. And that is my frustration with this experience, because even though it seems that Ubiquiti has a iOS app, it's under the Ubiquiti Identity app. And it says right there, File Access UNAS Pro. It's not really a it's not a file browser native to iOS. I just click it, it takes me to mobile Safari yet again, and then it logs me in using OAuth to my server. Now I can come in here and still browse around, and I can access my drives, and I can go to footage, and I can find the files, and I can download this PNG file if I want. But it's just not the same as a native app, and you run into limitations, particularly on iOS, file size, and that's really where this thing, to me, starts to fall off. Like many Ubiquiti products, it launches almost as like a beta product. It's really good. What it does well, it does excellent. But there's not much in the way of like super powerful user features. And honestly, in my opinion, that's what makes this thing compelling. It's not got a bunch of bloat like you find with a Synology, where half the crap you're trying to disable because it's like, do you want to see your photos? What about your videos? Do you want to remember? It's like, no, I just want you to be a NAS. This is a NAS in the truest sense. It is network attached storage that you can do some cool things with, but frankly, you can't do a lot of cool things with by design. It's $500, 10 gigabit Ethernet, 7 drive bays. You will not find a NAS with those specs. But it's just got a wimpy little ARM processor, and that's okay because it's not supposed to be a Plex file server. That's what you go out and buy a used M1 or M2 Mac Mini for a couple $100. You're still less than the price of a Synology, and you've got an M2. You can run all the Docker containers you want. You can run a Plex media server, just accessing this drive over the network via Samba. That's how things were meant to be. That's what I think a NAS should be. And frankly, it's already really good. I give it like a B+. And if Ubiquiti just polishes up some weird things like the time machine stuff and some user permissions and some more advanced features, they're gonna have a real killer product on their hands, especially at the right price. Thank you so much for watching. What servers are you interested in? What NAS do you use at home? And do you think this is all just a bunch of hogwash anyway? Who needs this much storage at home? Thanks so much for watching, and as always, stay snazzy.
I'm gonna aim it right at your face. See if I can shoot you. Hold, please. Oh, did it hit you?
He hit the lens.
Whoa!